My stepmother said I made her uncomfortable in her home. My dad reminded her whose name was on the deed. That was 3 years ago, back when I thought having him in my corner meant something. The warning signs started small. She'd rearrange my room while I was at school. My books would disappear into storage because they made the shelves look cluttered. My photos got tucked into drawers because personal items weren't part of her aesthetic vision. When I complained to Dad, he'd sigh and say she was just trying to make the house feel like home. By my junior year, she'd converted my study corner into her yoga space. I'd come home to find my desk shoved against the wall. "Do your homework in your room," she'd say sweetly. The real shift happened when I got accepted to state on a partial scholarship. I needed $8,000 more. I'd been saving since I was 14, working summers and weekends. I had $6,200 in an account Dad helped me open. "We can cover the rest," Dad said at dinner. She didn't speak for the remainder of the meal. The next morning, Dad took me to breakfast. "Just us. The thing is," he started, and my stomach dropped. "Your stepmother has concerns about the financial commitment. She thinks you should consider community college first." I stared at him. "I have a 3.9 GPA. I've worked since I was 14. What exactly do I need to prove?" When I checked my account that evening, $4,000 was gone. "She needed it for the kitchen renovation," he said quietly. "We'll pay you back." "I worked for that money," I said, my voice shaking. He promised to replace it by August. I picked up every shift I could find. I was pulling 30 hours a week on top of classes. Meanwhile, she was posting renovation updates on social media. Marble countertops, custom cabinets. April came. I was still $5,800 short. May arrived with an acceptance deadline. I asked Dad one final time. "Look," he said, "maybe college isn't the right path for you. You could work full-time, save money." I felt something crack inside my chest. "You promise," I whispered. "I know, and I'm sorry, but marriage is about compromise." I declined State's offer. I moved into my friend's basement and picked up a third job. 6 months later, I filed for emancipation. The judge granted it 3 weeks before my 18th birthday. Dad showed up looking devastated. "I didn't even know you'd filed," he said. "I tried talking to you for 2 years," I said. "You chose her every single time." I worked for 2 years, saving every penny. When I finally enrolled in college at 20, I paid for everything myself. I was a semester into my sophomore year when Dad called. I hadn't heard from him in 9 months. "We need to talk," he said. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. "Your stepmother and I are separating," he said. "And there's something you need to know." Turns out she didn't just borrow $4,000. Over 3 years, she drained my entire account, all $6,200, plus another $3,000 Dad had added without telling me. I sat frozen. "So you knew," I finally said. "Not until last month." I cut him off. "You had access to that account too." He reached across the table. "I want to make this right." I stood up. "You want to make it right," I said. "Then tell me one thing. When was I supposed to matter more than keeping her happy?" He had no answer. "Last week I got a call from Mercy General Hospital. Your father was brought in an hour ago," a woman's voice said. "He's asking for you. He's been in an accident and we found something in his car. Documents about your stepmother. Bank statements. Transfers you need to see." I stood in my apartment holding the phone, watching my roommate Becca mouth questions at me from the couch. The nurse was still talking. "He's stable," she said, "but he's insisting we call you before anyone else. He says it's urgent." I should have hung up. I should have blocked the number and gone back to studying for my anatomy exam. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Becca drove me because my hands were shaking too badly to hold the wheel. "You don't owe him anything," she kept saying. "Remember what he did. Remember how he chose." I remembered. I remembered all of it. But I also remembered the nurse's voice when she said we found something. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee. Dad was in room 314, awake but bandaged. His left arm was in a sling, and he had a cut above his eyebrow that had been stitched shut. When he saw me, something in his face crumpled. "You came," he said. "What happened?" I asked, not moving from the doorway. "Someone ran me off the road. Deliberately." He shifted in the bed, wincing. "I was coming back from meeting with a lawyer. I had documents with me, financial records, things your stepmother didn't want anyone to see." My stomach tightened. "What kind of things?" He gestured to a manila envelope on the side table. "The police gave that to me from my car. Everything else burned, but that envelope was thrown clear." He met my eyes. "She didn't just take your money. She's been embezzling from my business for 5 years, over $400,000. I stood there, processing. "You're telling me she stole from you too?" "Systematically. Monthly transfers to offshore accounts, forged signatures on loan documents. She even took out credit cards in my name." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I only found out because our accountant noticed discrepancies during the divorce proceedings." I walked to the table and picked up the envelope. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, copies of signatures that looked like Dad's but weren't quite right. The dates went back 6 years, before she'd touched my college fund, before she'd moved into our house and started erasing me from it. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because I need you to understand something." He struggled to sit up straighter. "When I chose her over you, I thought I was protecting our family. I thought keeping her happy meant keeping us stable. I was an idiot. But I need you to know she played me just like she played you, maybe worse." "That doesn't change what you did," I said quietly. "I know." His voice cracked. "I know it doesn't, but someone tried to kill me tonight. Someone who doesn't want these documents to see daylight. And if something happens to me, I need you to have this information. The lawyer I met with, his name is on the card in there. He's holding copies of everything. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. Who else knows about this? Just the lawyer. And now you. He paused. Your stepmother doesn't know I found out. At least I don't think she did until tonight. The implications settled between us like something heavy. You think she tried to have you killed? I think someone followed me from the lawyer's office and ran me off the road on purpose. I think my brakes were cut because they failed completely when I tried to stop. And I think your stepmother has a lot to lose if this information goes public. I should have left then. Should have dropped the envelope and walked away from the whole mess. Instead, I heard myself ask, what do you want me to do? Keep those safe. Don't tell anyone you have them. And if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you, I said automatically. If something happens, give them to the police. Make sure she doesn't get away with this. He looked at me with something like desperation. Please. I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but please. I left the hospital with the envelope tucked inside my jacket. Becca was waiting in the car, scrolling through her phone. Well, he thinks my stepmother tried to kill him, I said, buckling my seatbelt. Becca stared at me. Are you serious? I showed her the documents on the drive back. She pulled over twice to read them under streetlights, her face getting paler with each page. This is insane, she kept saying. This is actually insane. When we got back to the apartment, I hid the envelope under my mattress. Then I pulled it out and hid it in my closet. Then I moved it again, this time inside a textbook on my shelf. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dad's face when he said someone ran me off the road deliberately. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. A woman's voice, cold and measured. I understand you visited your father tonight. Who is this? I asked, already knowing. You should stay out of family business that doesn't concern you. My stepmother's voice was different than I remembered. Harder. The sweetness completely stripped away. Whatever he told you, whatever he gave you, it's based on misunderstandings. Financial complications from the divorce. He showed me bank statements, I said. Transfer records, your signatures, forged documents from a desperate man trying to avoid his own financial mistakes. She laughed, but it sounded wrong. I'm disappointed in you. After everything we've been through, you'd take his word over mine. You stole my college fund, I said flatly. You drained my account and blamed him. I borrowed money from a family account during a difficult time. Your father approved every transfer. Now he's rewriting history to make himself look better in the divorce. Don't let him manipulate you. Someone tried to kill him tonight, I said. Silence on the other end. Then carefully, is that what he told you? His brakes were cut. He was run off the road after meeting with his lawyer. How tragic. Her voice was ice. I hope he recovers. And I hope you're smart enough to stay out of adult matters you don't understand. For your own safety. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, holding my phone, my heart hammering. Becca appeared in my doorway. Did I hear you on the phone? I told her everything. She paced the room, running her hands through her hair. Okay, she said finally. Okay, we need to think about this logically. Your stepmother just threatened you. She didn't exactly threaten me. She said for your own safety. That's a threat. Becca grabbed my laptop. We need to document everything. Every conversation, every document, every weird thing that happens from now on. We spent the rest of the night making copies of the bank statements. Becca uploaded them to 3 different cloud storage accounts under fake names. I photographed every page with my phone. We made a timeline of every financial transaction, every date, every amount. By morning, we had a case file that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. I went to class that day in a fog. My anatomy professor called on me twice and I had no idea what she'd asked. Between classes, I kept checking my phone. No word from Dad, no word from the hospital, no more calls from my stepmother. At lunch, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is attorney Raymond Howell. Your father asked me to contact you. Can we meet today? I showed Becca the message. She read it 3 times. Could be legitimate. Could be a trap. Only one way to find out, I said. We met attorney Howell at a coffee shop near campus. He was maybe 50, gray at the temples, wearing an expensive suit that somehow looked rumpled. He ordered black coffee and got straight to business. Your father briefed me before the accident, he said. He wanted you to have access to everything we've compiled. He slid a flash drive across the table. This contains 6 years of financial records. Everything we've been able to recover showing the systematic theft from his business accounts. I picked up the drive. Why me? Because you're the only person he trusts. He paused. And because you have standing. Standing for what? Becca asked. Attorney Howell looked at me directly. Your college fund was held in a custodial account. Your father was the custodian, but you were the legal beneficiary. When your stepmother drained that account, she didn't just steal from your father. She stole from you directly. You can file criminal charges independent of anything your father does. I felt something shift in my chest. I can press charges myself? Yes. And given that you're his daughter, you can also access his medical records if needed. You can speak on his behalf if he becomes unable to speak for himself. He wants you protected in every possible way. Protected from what? I asked. From whoever cut his brakes. Attorney Howell's face was grim. The police are investigating it as a potential homicide attempt. They're looking at everyone with a financial motive. Your stepmother is at the top of that list. I went back to the hospital that evening. Dad was asleep, so I sat in the chair by his bed and watched the monitors beep. A detective showed up around 6 p.m., a tired-looking woman named Detective Patricia Walsh. She had questions about my stepmother, about their relationship, about whether I'd noticed anything unusual. I told her everything: the phone call at 3 a.m., the threat disguised as concern, the systematic erasure of me from the house, the stolen college fund. Detective Walsh took notes without looking up. Do you feel safe? I don't know, I said honestly. Stay with friends. Change your routine. Don't go anywhere alone. She handed me her card. And call me if anything else happens. Anything at all. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. Becca and I stayed at her boyfriend's place across town. We didn't tell anyone where we were. I turned off my phone's location services and checked the locks on the doors twice. At 2 a.m., my phone rang. The hospital. Your father's condition has deteriorated, the nurse said. You should come now. We threw on clothes and drove through empty streets. I kept thinking about my stepmother's voice on the phone. For your own safety. Like a promise and a threat wrapped together. Dad was unconscious when we arrived. The doctor explained something about internal bleeding they'd missed. Emergency surgery, complications. I signed forms I didn't read. I called Attorney Howell and left a voicemail. I sat in the surgical waiting room and watched the clock. He made it through surgery. Barely. When they let me see him, he was intubated. Machines breathing for him. The doctor said the next 24 hours were critical. I stayed. Becca brought me coffee and sandwiches I couldn't eat. Detective Walsh showed up around noon and asked to see Dad's car. The mechanic's report showed clean cuts on the brake lines. Professional work. Deliberate. Do you have any suspects? I asked. We're investigating several possibilities. Detective Walsh looked at me carefully. Your stepmother has an alibi for the time of the accident. She was at a charity function with 200 witnesses. That doesn't mean she didn't hire someone, I said. No, it doesn't. Dad woke up on the second day. Groggy, confused, but alive. The first thing he said when he saw me was, "Did you keep them safe?" "The documents are safe," I told him. Good. His voice was rough from the intubation. Good. Don't trust anyone. Not until this is over. Over the next week, things started happening. Small things at first. Someone broke into Attorney Howell's office and stole his computer. Nothing else, just the computer with all his case files. He had backups, but it was a message. "We know what you're doing." Then my apartment was ransacked. They didn't take my laptop or Becca's jewelry or anything valuable. They just tore the place apart looking for something specific. The police dusted for prints and found nothing. I moved in with Becca's boyfriend permanently. I started carrying pepper spray. I took different routes to campus every day. I felt like I was living in a thriller movie, except the fear was real and constant. Detective Walsh called 2 weeks after Dad's accident. "We've arrested someone for the brake tampering. A mechanic from the shop where your stepmother gets her car serviced. He's talking to avoid heavier charges." "Did he say who hired him?" I asked. "He said a woman paid him $5,000 cash to disable your father's brakes. He identified your stepmother from a photo lineup." My hands started shaking. "So you're arresting her?" "We're bringing her in for questioning. But I need to warn you, proving she hired him will be difficult. He took cash. There's no paper trail. His testimony might not be enough without corroboration." "What about the financial records?" I asked. "The embezzlement?" "That's separate. We've referred it to the fraud division, but that's a slower process. White-collar crime takes time to prosecute, so she might get away with it." Detective Walsh sighed. "I'm not going to lie to you. Rich people with good lawyers often do. But we're building the best case we can." My stepmother was arrested on a Wednesday afternoon. It made the local news. Prominent socialite questioned in connection with attempted homicide. She was released 6 hours later on $100,000 bail. That night, she called me. Same cold voice. "You've made a terrible mistake." I hung up. She called back immediately. I hung up again. She sent a text. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." I blocked her number. She sent emails, called from different phones, showed up at my campus. Security escorted her off twice. Attorney Howell filed a restraining order on my behalf. It was granted. My stepmother violated it within a week, trying to approach me outside my biology class. She was arrested again. More bail. More restrictions she ignored. The criminal case dragged on for months. The mechanic's testimony was solid, but my stepmother's lawyers argued he was unreliable, that he'd made up the story to reduce his own sentence. They painted her as a victim of a vindictive ex-husband and his manipulated daughter. The embezzlement case moved even slower. Forensic accountants pored over 6 years of records. They found pattern after pattern of theft, but my stepmother's lawyers claimed it was all my father's mismanagement. They produced documents showing he'd approved various transfers. Forged documents, Attorney Howell said, but proving forgery took time. Dad recovered slowly. He moved into a small apartment near the hospital for physical therapy. We started talking again. Carefully at first, then more easily. He apologized a lot. Too much, probably. I'm sorry didn't fix anything, but hearing him say it mattered somehow. One afternoon, he asked me about school, how I was paying for it now that my fund was gone. "Student loans and 3 part-time jobs," I said. "It's fine." "It's not fine." He looked sick. "I'm going to pay you back. Every penny. Once this is settled, once I get control of my accounts again." "I don't want your money," I interrupted. "I want you to testify. I want you to stand up in court and tell them what she did. To both of us." He nodded slowly. "I will. I promise." The weeks turned into months and the legal proceedings became my entire life. I'd wake up, go to class, work my shifts at the campus library and the coffee shop downtown, then spend my evenings with Attorney Howell going over depositions and evidence. Sleep became something I did in 3-hour increments between anxiety attacks. Becca started making me eat actual meals. She'd show up at the library with sandwiches and force me to take breaks. "You're going to burn out," she kept saying. "You need to take care of yourself." But I couldn't stop. Every time I slowed down, I saw my stepmother's face. That cold smile she'd worn when she told me the house was hers now, the way she'd rearranged my entire life like I was just another piece of furniture that didn't match her aesthetic. Detective Walsh kept me updated on the investigation. They'd found more evidence. Security footage from the mechanic's shop showing my stepmother's car there 3 days before Dad's accident. Phone records showing calls between her and the mechanic. Text messages that had been deleted but recovered by forensic specialists. "It's looking better," Detective Walsh said during one of our meetings. "But I want you prepared for the possibility that she walks on the attempted murder charges. The defense is going to argue circumstantial evidence. No direct proof she ordered the hit." "What about the embezzlement?" I asked. "That's stronger. We have the paper trail, the forged signatures, expert testimony showing the transfers were unauthorized." She paused. "But white-collar cases are tricky. Juries don't always convict wealthy defendants for financial crimes, so she could get away with all of it? Possibly." Detective Walsh met my eyes. "Which is why we need you ready to testify. Your testimony about the college fund theft is crucial. You're the victim with the clearest case." I spent the next month preparing for trial. Attorney Howell drilled me on questions the defense would ask: how to stay calm under cross-examination, how to stick to facts without getting emotional, how to tell my story in a way the jury would believe. It was exhausting. Every practice session left me drained, reliving the worst moments of the past 3 years. The day I found my account empty, the night I filed for emancipation, the morning I declined state and watched my future crumble. Dad attended some of the prep sessions. He looked older now, grayer. The accident had aged him in ways that had nothing to do with the physical injuries. He walked with a slight limp and his left hand still shook sometimes. During one break, he pulled me aside. "I know I keep saying this, but I need you to hear it. I failed you. Not just with the money, with everything. I chose keeping the peace over protecting my daughter, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it." "I know," I said quietly. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Ask me again when this is over." The preliminary hearings started in September. I sat in the courtroom and watched my stepmother's lawyers tear apart the prosecution's case piece by piece. They argued the mechanic was lying for a plea deal. The security footage was inconclusive. The phone records proved nothing. My stepmother sat at the defense table looking like a victim. She wore modest clothes and minimal makeup. Her lawyers had clearly coached her on the optics. She even cried during one particularly emotional moment, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. It made me sick. During a recess, I saw her in the hallway. She was on her phone, laughing at something. The tears were completely gone. When she noticed me watching, her expression shifted. For just a second, I saw the real her, cold, calculating, completely unbothered by any of this. Then the mask slipped back into place and she looked away. The judge ruled there was enough evidence to proceed to trial on both the attempted murder and embezzlement charges. Trial was set for January, 4 months away. Those 4 months were the longest of my life. I threw myself into school, desperate for any distraction. My grades somehow improved. Turns out constant anxiety is great for hyperfocus, but the nightmares got worse. I'd dream about finding Dad's car wrapped around a tree, flames everywhere, his voice calling for help I couldn't give. I'd wake up gasping, soaked in sweat, Becca shaking my shoulder. "You need to talk to someone," she said after one particularly bad episode. "Like a professional someone." I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Nina Reeves, a woman in her 60s who specialized in trauma. She didn't try to fix me or tell me everything would be okay. She just listened while I talked about the anger and fear and grief I'd been carrying for years. "Your stepmother didn't just steal money," Dr. Reeves said during one session. "She stole your sense of safety, your trust in your father, your belief that the adults in your life would protect you. That's a profound loss. How do I get that back?" I asked. "You don't." Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "You build something new, something stronger, something that belongs only to you." I started journaling, writing down everything I remembered, everything I felt. It was brutal at first, like ripping open old wounds, but slowly it started to help. The nightmares came less frequently. The panic attacks became manageable. Dad and I kept meeting for coffee once a week. The conversations got easier. We talked about normal things sometimes. Movies we'd seen, books we were reading, the weather. Other times we talked about the hard stuff, like the day he married my stepmother, 6 months after my mom died. How I'd felt erased, replaced, like my grief didn't matter because he'd found someone new. "I should have waited," he said. "Given you more time, given us both more time." But I was scared of being alone with my grief, and she seemed like an answer to that fear. She was good at seeming like the answer. I said, "Yeah." He stared into his coffee. "Yeah, she was." Attorney Howell called in December with news. "The prosecution wants you to testify first. Lead with your story. Show the jury who she really is before they hear from the financial experts." "I'm ready," I said, not feeling ready at all. The trial started on January 8th. The courthouse was packed. Apparently wealthy socialite on trial for attempted murder was big news. Cameras everywhere. Reporters shouting questions. I kept my head down and followed Attorney Howell inside. Jury selection took 2 days. then opening statements. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. The embezzlement, the college fund theft, the cut-break lines, a pattern of financial crimes escalating to attempted murder. The defense painted a different picture. A woman caught in a bitter divorce, a stepmother trying to navigate a difficult family situation, a victim of false accusations from a vindictive ex-husband and his estranged daughter. Then it was my turn to testify. I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs. The bailiff swore me in. I sat down and looked at the jury, 12 faces staring back at me, waiting to judge whether I was telling the truth. The prosecutor started gentle. Basic questions. My name, my age, my relationship to the defendant. Then we got into it. Tell the jury about your college fund. I took a breath and started talking about working since I was 14, saving every dollar, the excitement of getting accepted to state. The morning Dad told me the money was gone. How did that make you feel? The prosecutor asked. Betrayed. I kept my voice steady. I'd trusted my father to protect that money, to protect me, and he chose her instead. Objection, the defense attorney called. Speculation about the defendant's involvement. Sustained, the judge said. Stick to what you know, not what you assume. I nodded and continued. I told them about declining state, about filing for emancipation, about working 3 jobs to save enough to eventually go to college anyway. The prosecutor showed the jury copies of my bank statements, the withdrawals, the dates, the amounts, everything documented in black and white. Did you authorize these withdrawals? He asked. No. Did you know they were happening? Not until it was too late. The cross-examination was brutal. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a resentful stepdaughter, someone who'd never accepted my father's new wife, someone willing to lie to hurt her. Isn't it true you resented your stepmother from the beginning? I didn't trust her, I said carefully. There's a difference. Because she replaced your mother? Because she started erasing me from my own home? The attorney smiled like I'd walked into a trap. Erasing you. That's quite dramatic. Can you give specific examples? I gave them. The rearranged room, the disappeared photos, the converted study space, the kitchen renovation funded with my college money. Some of these sound like normal household changes, the attorney said. Perhaps you were just being difficult. I was being a teenager who watched her father choose his new wife's comfort over his daughter's future. The attorney changed tactics. Tried to suggest Dad had approved the withdrawals and I was mistaken. Tried to imply I'd forged the documents to frame my stepmother. But Attorney Howell had prepared me for this. I stayed calm, stuck to facts, let the evidence speak for itself. After 3 hours on the stand, the judge called a recess. I stumbled off, exhausted. Becca met me in the hallway with water and a granola bar. You did amazing, she said. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Normal reaction, she squeezed my hand. But you did it. You told your truth. Dad testified next. He walked through the embezzlement in painful detail. The fake invoices, the forged signatures, the offshore accounts, how he'd discovered it all during the divorce proceedings. The defense tried to argue he'd mismanaged his business and was blaming my stepmother to avoid responsibility. But Dad had documents. Years of financial records, expert testimony from forensic accountants showing the theft patterns. Then came the mechanic. He testified about my stepmother approaching him, offering $5,000 cash to disable Dad's brakes. Make it look like an accident, she'd said. He identified her in court, pointed right at her. The defense destroyed him on cross-examination, pointed out his criminal record, his plea deal, suggested he was lying to reduce his sentence. But the prosecution had corroboration, security footage of my stepmother's car at his shop, phone records, text messages discussing car trouble even though her car had no issues. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Expert witnesses, character witnesses, hours of testimony dissecting every financial transaction. My stepmother never took the stand. Her lawyers advised against it. Instead, they called witnesses who painted her as a generous philanthropist, a devoted wife, a woman incapable of such crimes. They showed photos of her at charity events, letters from organizations she'd donated to, testimonials from friends describing her kindness. I sat in the gallery and wondered if we were talking about the same person. Closing arguments came on a Friday. The prosecution tied everything together: the pattern of theft, the escalation, the attempted murder when Dad threatened to expose her. The defense argued reasonable doubt, circumstantial evidence, a rush to judgment against an innocent woman. The jury got the case at 4 p.m. They deliberated through the weekend. I spent those days in a fog, went to class but absorbed nothing, worked my shifts at the library but couldn't focus on shelving books. Becca made me eat. Dr. Reeves squeezed in an emergency session. The waiting is the worst part, she said. The uncertainty. The lack of control. How do people survive this? I asked. One breath at a time. Dr. Reeves smiled sadly. There's no shortcut through it. You just have to feel it. Monday morning, my phone rang. Attorney Howell, the jury's back. Get to the courthouse. Becca drove me. Dad met us outside. He looked like he hadn't slept. Probably hadn't. We sat in the courtroom as the jury filed in. I tried to read their faces, looking for clues. They all looked tired. Some wouldn't meet my stepmother's eyes. That had to be a good sign, right? The judge asked if they'd reached a verdict. The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. My heart hammered so hard I thought everyone could hear it. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find? We find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. I sat frozen, Becca squeezing my hand so tight it hurt. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find? Guilty. On the charges of embezzlement and wire fraud? Guilty on all counts. I watched my stepmother's face. For the first time since this started, she looked shaken. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder. She shook it off. The judge set sentencing for 3 weeks later. My stepmother was remanded into custody immediately. As they led her away, she looked directly at me. Not angry, not pleading, just empty. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Attorney Howell handled the questions. Dad and I stood to the side watching. We did it, he said quietly. Yeah, I felt numb. Yeah, we did. The sentencing hearing was anticlimactic. The judge gave her 15 years for attempted murder, 10 for conspiracy, and another 8 for the embezzlement charges, to run consecutively. 33 years total. She'll be 71 when she gets out, Attorney Howell said afterward. If she gets out, Dad added. The civil suits came next. Dad sued to recover the embezzled funds. I sued for my college fund plus damages. The judgments came fast. The judge ordered her to pay back every penny, plus interest, plus punitive damages. Of course, collecting was another matter. Her assets were tied up in various accounts, properties, and investments. It would take years to track everything down. But we had time. I graduated with my nursing degree that spring, 2 years late, but with honors. Dad came to the ceremony with flowers. We took pictures together, posted them on social media, reclaiming the narrative she'd tried to control. I started working in the ER at Mercy General, the same hospital where Dad had been brought after the accident. Some nights I'd walk past room 314 and remember how everything had changed there. Dad and I settled into a routine. Dinner once a month, phone calls every Sunday. We talked about work, about books, about his physical therapy. We didn't talk about her unless we had to. The trauma therapist said that was healthy, building new patterns, creating a relationship separate from the damage she'd caused. It took another year to collect most of the civil judgment. The court ordered the sale of her properties, the liquidation of her offshore accounts. Every month, money appeared in my account, pieces of my stolen future coming back. I paid off my student loans, put a down payment on a small house, started a scholarship fund for students whose college savings had been stolen by family members, turned my pain into something useful. Dad rebuilt his business, installed better financial controls, hired an outside firm to audit everything monthly. He'd learned his lesson about blind trust. We both had. 2 years after the conviction, I got a letter from prison. My stepmother wanted to see me, said she had things to explain, apologies to make. I threw it away. 3 months later, another letter, then another. Always the same message. Please visit. Let me explain. I've changed. I never responded. Dr. Reeves asked me about it during one of our sessions. Do you ever wonder what she'd say? No, I said, because nothing she says could change what she did, and I don't owe her closure. Fair enough. Dr. Reeves smiled. Some doors are better left closed. Dad asked about the letters too. Said he'd gotten them as well. Deleted them all. Do you think she actually regrets it? I asked him. He considered for a long moment. I think she regrets getting caught. That's not the same thing as regret. Year 3 brought appeals. My stepmother's lawyers argued ineffective counsel, improper jury instructions, insufficient evidence. Every appeal was denied. The conviction stood. I stopped checking the legal updates, stopped letting her consume my mental energy. I had a life to live, a career to build, relationships to nurture. Becca got engaged, asked me to be her maid of honor. We spent weekends dress shopping and planning centerpieces. Normal things, happy things. Dad met someone new, a widow named Catherine who worked as a librarian. She was kind and patient and absolutely nothing like my stepmother. I had dinner with them and actually enjoyed it. You really like her, I said to Dad afterward. I do. He looked almost shy. Is that okay? Yeah, I meant it. It's okay. Life moved forward, the way it does whether you're ready or not. I bought better furniture for my house, hung photos on the walls without worrying someone would put them away, created a space that was mine in a way nothing had been since before my stepmother arrived. Work was good, hard, but good. I helped people on their worst days, held hands during scary diagnoses, celebrated when patients recovered, found purpose in the chaos. And slowly, without noticing exactly when, I stopped being angry all the time. The rage that had fueled me through the trial, through the lawsuits, through everything, it started to fade. Not gone. Never completely gone, but manageable. Contained. Dr. Reeves said that was growth, learning to hold the anger without letting it hold you. Year 4 brought parole hearings. My stepmother would be eligible after serving a minimum sentence. I submitted a victim impact statement opposing release. So did Dad. The parole board denied her request. Would consider again in 2 years. I'm not sure I'll submit a statement next time, I told Dad. He looked surprised. Really? I think I'm done letting her have this much space in my life. If they release her, they release her. I'm not spending the rest of my life fighting her. That's mature of you. Or maybe I'm just tired. I shrugged. Either way, I'm choosing me for once. Becca's wedding was beautiful. I stood beside her while she married her college boyfriend in a garden ceremony, caught the bouquet and laughed when everyone cheered. Dad danced with me at the reception, stepped on my toes twice and apologized both times. We were still figuring out how to be comfortable with each other. But we were trying. That counts for something, Dr. Reeves said. Catherine joined us for Thanksgiving that year. She brought homemade pies and stories about her grandchildren, made Dad laugh in ways I hadn't heard in years. After dinner, she helped me with dishes while Dad dozed in front of the football game. I want you to know I'm not trying to replace anyone, she said quietly. Your mother? Or even… She trailed off, not wanting to say my stepmother's name. I know. I handed her a plate to dry. You're just trying to be yourself. That's enough. She smiled, relieved. Your father talks about you constantly. He's so proud of who you've become despite everything. Despite him, you mean? Catherine met my eyes. He knows what he did wrong. He's working on being better. That's all any of us can do, right? Work on being better. Year 5, I got promoted to senior nurse. More responsibility, better pay, a chance to mentor new nurses. I thought about younger me, that kid working 3 jobs to save for college, and wished I could tell her it would all work out. Different than planned, but still good. I started dating someone. Another nurse named Felix who worked night shifts and made terrible jokes during code blues. Nothing serious yet, but promising. He knew about my past. I'd told him early, testing whether he'd run. He'd just nodded and said, everyone's got a story. That's yours. Doesn't change who you are now. I brought him to dinner at Dad's house, watched him charm Catherine and hold his own in a debate with Dad about basketball. Felt something settle in my chest that might have been contentment. The civil judgment was finally settled. Every dollar accounted for, recovered, redistributed. My scholarship fund was fully endowed. I'd helped 12 students so far, kids whose families had stolen their college savings, watched them graduate, celebrated their successes, turned my trauma into someone else's triumph. Dad asked me once if I'd forgiven him. We were at his house, just the 2 of us, Catherine out visiting her daughter. I don't know, I said honestly. Some days, yes. Some days I'm still that kid watching you choose her over me. That's fair. He looked older now, almost 60. Grayer and slower, but somehow more present than he'd been during those years with my stepmother. I don't know if I've forgiven myself. Maybe that's not the point, I said. Maybe we just keep showing up for each other anyway. He nodded. I can do that. Year 6. My stepmother came up for parole again. This time, I didn't submit a statement. Let the record speak for itself. Let the board decide without my input. She was denied again. Would be eligible in 3 more years. I felt nothing when I heard. No relief, no anger, no satisfaction. Just nothing. She'd become background noise in my life. Something that happened, not something that defined me. That's when I knew I'd healed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Felix proposed on a Tuesday after a brutal 12-hour shift. We were in the hospital cafeteria, exhausted and covered in other people's bodily fluids, and he just pulled out a ring. This is disgusting timing, I said, laughing and crying at once. I know, he grinned, but I couldn't wait another second to ask. I said yes. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony, just close friends and family. Dad walked me down the aisle without crying, which was impressive. Catherine sobbed enough for both of them. I wore my mom's necklace, the one I'd hidden for years before my stepmother could take it. Something old, something that connected me to who I'd been before everything fell apart. Becca was my maid of honor again. She made a speech about how I'd survived the unsurvivable and come out stronger. Everyone cried, even Felix, though he denied it later. We honeymooned in Ireland, hiking through green hills and staying in tiny bed and breakfasts. Felix let me process everything at my own pace. Never pushed when I got quiet. Just held my hand and waited. One night, sitting in a pub in Galway, he asked me if I'd ever want to have kids. I don't know, I said. I'm scared of messing them up the way I was messed up. You're also scared of lots of things you do anyway. He squeezed my hand. You don't have to decide now. Just know I'll support whatever you choose. Year 7, Dad had a health scare. Minor heart attack, but enough to remind us both he wasn't invincible. I sat with him in the hospital, the roles reversed from that night after his accident. I keep thinking about time, he said. How much I wasted. How much I could have had with you if I'd made better choices. You can't get that time back, I said gently. But we have now. Is now enough? It has to be. Catherine moved in with him after that. Took early retirement to help with his recovery. They got married quietly at City Hall, just the 2 of them and a witness. Dad called to tell me after. I hope you're not upset we didn't invite you, he said nervously. Dad, I'm happy for you. I meant it. You deserve this. So do you. His voice got thick. You deserved better than what I gave you. What we both gave you. I know, but I'm okay now. We're okay. We are? Yeah, we are. Year 8, I made the decision. Felix and I started trying for a baby. It took 6 months and 3 rounds of fertility treatments, but eventually, 2 lines appeared on the test. I called Dad crying. Happy tears this time. He showed up at my house an hour later with flowers and baby books and more tears. Catherine came too, already knitting something tiny and blue. We don't know if it's a boy yet, I said laughing. Blue is for everyone, she said firmly. The pregnancy was hard. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion so deep I could barely function. But Felix rubbed my feet and brought me crackers and reminded me it would be worth it. Dad visited every week, helped set up the nursery, assembled furniture while Catherine sorted tiny clothes. They were excited in a way that felt healing, like they were getting a second chance to be present. I went into labor 3 weeks early. Felix held my hand through 14 hours of contractions. Dad and Catherine waited in the hall, according to the nurse who kept updating them. When my daughter finally arrived, screaming and perfect and absolutely terrifying, I understood something I hadn't before, about how love could make you vulnerable, about how the need to protect someone could make you make terrible choices. I didn't forgive my father for what he'd done, but I understood it better. We named her Charlotte. No family names, no baggage, just a name we both liked. Dad cried when he held her for the first time, asked permission before every visit, treated his grandparent status like a privilege he had to earn, not a right he was owed. It was exactly what I needed from him. Year 9, Charlotte learned to walk. Felix and I bought a bigger house with a yard. I cut back my hours at the hospital to part-time, let myself prioritize differently. My stepmother came up for parole again. This time, the board granted it. Conditional release after serving 9 years of her sentence. The victim services coordinator called to notify me. I listened to the conditions. Electronic monitoring, restraining orders, mandatory therapy, regular check-ins. And? Felix asked when I hung up. And nothing. She's someone else's problem now. Does it bother you that she's out? I thought about it. No, she can't hurt me anymore. I won't let her. The first few months after her release, I checked my mirrors constantly, jumped at unexpected knocks on the door. But she never came, never called, never violated the restraining order. Eventually, I stopped checking, stopped thinking about her except when something reminded me. And even then, the thoughts were fleeting, passing clouds instead of storms. Year 10, Dad's business partner retired. Dad sold the company and actually retired himself. He and Catherine bought an RV and started traveling. They'd send postcards from national parks and tiny towns I'd never heard of. They were happy. It was strange to see. Charlotte started preschool, made friends, came home singing songs and covered in paint, had no idea about the complicated history that had shaped her grandfather, her mother, her entire family structure. Maybe I'd tell her someday, when she was older, when she could understand nuance and complexity and the ways people could fail each other and still find their way back. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe some stories didn't need to be passed down. Felix got a promotion. We talked about having another baby. Decided Charlotte was enough. Our perfect, exhausting, wonderful enough. I ran into someone from high school at the grocery store. She asked what I'd been up to for the past decade. I gave her the short version. College, nursing, marriage, kid. Left out the parts about embezzlement and attempted murder and rebuilding relationships from rubble. Some stories weren't for casual conversation. Year 11, I stopped seeing Dr. Reeves regularly. Moved to every other month, then quarterly, then just as needed. The trauma would always be part of me, she'd said, but it didn't have to be the biggest part anymore. I believed her. Dad had another health scare. More serious this time. Triple bypass surgery. I took family leave to help Catherine during his recovery. We spent long afternoons in his hospital room, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting. Comfortable silences that would have been impossible years ago. He told me about my mom one day, how they'd met, their first date, the way she'd laughed at his terrible jokes, things he'd never talked about before, like the grief had finally softened enough to let the good memories through. I wish she could have met Charlotte, he said. Me too. She would have been a better grandmother than I'm a grandfather. You're doing fine, Dad. He looked at me with something like wonder. You mean that? Yeah, I did. I really do. Year 12, I got a letter. My stepmother's handwriting. No return address. I stood at the mailbox holding it, debating. Felix came up behind me, saw what I was holding. You going to open it? I don't know. Want me to read it first? I handed it to him. He read it right there on the sidewalk, his expression neutral. Then he looked up. She says she's sorry. That prison gave her time to reflect, that she understands what she did was wrong and hopes someday you can forgive her. I waited. She wants to meet, talk things through, make amends. No, I said immediately. Felix nodded. Want me to throw this away? I thought about it. About the girl I'd been at 16, desperate for her college fund and her father's support. About the woman I'd become despite everything. About Charlotte inside, playing with blocks, oblivious to the complicated adult world swirling around her. No, I said finally. I'll keep it, but I won't respond. Fair enough. Felix tucked the letter in his pocket. We went inside together. I filed the letter away in a box in the attic with all the other documents from that time. Court transcripts, bank statements, evidence of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Maybe in another decade, I'd read it again. Maybe not. Either way, I had the rest of my life to decide. That was enough. That was everything.